The news, stunning news that came across, so we've been hearing about for the last few days, but now we have a name behind the accusation. Let's bring in Judge Andrew Napolitano, Fox News senior judicial analyst, on the phone last night after Christine Blasey Ford came forward as the professor, the woman, the accuser behind Brett Kavanaugh, who claims in high school she was assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh and a classmate. So we go back to the 1980s for this. We had an anonymous accuser. Dianne Feinstein found out about this in July. Then we hear about it a couple of days ago, and now we have a name. What does it mean for his nomination?
So Steve Hilton, they asked me last night, how does law enforcement view this? Law enforcement would view it very, very skeptically because of the passage of time.
35 years.
35 years. So all statutes of limitations, civil and criminal, both statutes of limitations have obviously expired. Memories fade. Her ability to recall details obviously will be diminished with the passage of time. But because we are in this era, the post-Robert Bork, post-Clarence Thomas era of Supreme Court hearings before the Judiciary Committee.
And Me Too.
Yes, and we're in the Me Too era. I think that this Dr. Ford will be asked to testify, and Judge Kavanaugh will be asked to testify, and we're going to see another version of the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill hearings right before our eyes sometime in the next few weeks, maybe as soon as Thursday. So the Senate Judiciary Committee will have to decide, is she credible? Is Judge Kavanaugh's denial credible? Is this some sort of a political stunt, some sort of a political Hail Mary from the left? Or did this actually happen as she says it did? Did she have a repressed memory, as she says she has, until she was in counseling with her husband in 2012? Now, the counseling with her husband in 2012 is corroborated by the psychiatrist or psychologist with whom she and her husband were having the counseling.
Although that psychiatrist wrote in her notes that there were 4 men there present. The woman says, actually, that's not true. There were 4 people at the party. There were only 2 in the room with me. The friend that was in the room, the friend that she says jumped on top of them.
He's denied it emphatically.
Yeah, he's denying it.
This is what happens when events like this are brought to the fore 35 years later. Memories are different, and people remember, memories fade, and people remember things differently. 2 people seeing the same thing at the same time will recall it differently the next day, much less 35 years later.
According to the Washington Post, which broke this story yesterday afternoon with the name, this woman, Christine Blasey Ford, contacted them through a tip line and told her story, and then wanted to come out because Kavanaugh had been named to the short list. And then she contacted her Democratic congresswoman, and then she sent a letter to Dianne Feinstein, who, knew this story back in July. And so people are going, well, why wouldn't she tell people about the story back in July?
You know, there's 2 arguments here. One is, as I said, this is a Democratic Party, capital D, left-wing Hail Mary effort to block an otherwise qualified nominee who the Democrats fear will interfere with Roe versus Wade. The other is Senator Feinstein did the right thing. She did not reveal the existence of this because Dr. Ford didn't want it revealed until...
Wanted her privacy.
Correct. Until something happened in the past week or so. I think it was a website somehow got a hold of this and revealed it, and then Senator Feinstein...
Yeah, reporters started knocking on her door.
Right. Senator Feinstein decided, I got to show this to Senator Grassley, and I got to show this to other members of the committee. The committee's stamp of approval is not required in order for the Kavanaugh nomination to go to the floor. So if Senator Graham and Senator Flake, who have expressed a wish to hear more about this before the vote on Thursday, were to vote against the nominee because they are undecided over this latest allegation, that would not prevent the full Senate from taking...
So it doesn't have to be passed by the committee.
Correct.
It could go just directly to the full Senate.
Unlike a lot of legislation, which has to have the imprimatur of a committee,
But Judge,
a nomination to the Supreme Court does not.
We have 51-49, right?
That's a problem.
51-49. So if you lose, even if it gets out of committee, even though it loses in committee, if Jeff Flake says no, Lisa and Senator Collins says, I'm going to wait to see what's going on here. Murkowski was going to wait to see what's going to go on here. Lindsey Graham's going to wait to see. Bob Corker's going to wait to see. Then it looks like they don't have the votes.
Then Mitch McConnell has to go to the Democrats who are running for re-election in states that the president carried handily in 2016 and ask them if they want to do it. But the more Republicans that start to say no, the more difficult that job will, or maybe, right, Brian, the more difficult that job will be for Mitch McConnell.
What do you think?
I also have to say this. Judge Kavanaugh has had 6 full-fledged FBI investigations. 4 for his time in the Bush White House, for his job, and each time he got a higher level of security clearance. 1 for the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, on which he sits now, second highest court in the land, and 1 for his nomination for the Supreme Court. This didn't come out at all. I have had 2 of these. I know how thorough they are. I couldn't believe the stuff they found out about me. So it is hard for me to believe that this thing, as monumental as it sounds, never was found by the FBI.
But the accuser says she never told anybody about it.
I guess she kept it to herself, or had some mental block, just
Judge,
didn't want to think about it.
What happens? How is she able to prove it? It's been so long. It doesn't sound like she went.
Just like when Anita Hill made those allegations against then Judge, now Justice Thomas. This is a classic he said, she said. So she'll come before the Senate Judiciary Committee. She'll make these allegations. The Democrats will throw her softballs. The Republicans will grill her and cross-examine her.
Not really, because the Republicans have to be smart about it. We're in a different time now.
We are.
So, I mean, you got to be deferential to the accuser always. That makes sense.
You also have
now
to,
more than ever.
But you have to challenge her ability to recall, and you have to point out inconsistencies in the story.
Right. But do you see that this also plays into the general election? So
yes.
if the Republicans come out
ham-handed? I also see that this is a vastly different time period with different social mores than the time that Anita Hill made her allegations against Justice Thomas.
Right. 65 women who knew him in high school have also penned a letter saying that he was an upstanding guy.
And lastly, Senator Grassley has come out and said, I'm setting up phone calls
I don't
with
think
them.
that's going to work, Brian.
No.
I don't think you can assess the credibility of a person who comes out of the blue with an allegation of this magnitude on the basis of a voice on the phone.
So the chances of a vote on Thursday?
Well, I think there's chances of a hearing on Thursday and perhaps a vote when the hearing is over.
All right. Judge, thank you very much.
You're welcome,
Thanks,
guys.
Judge.
And we're switching gears to Supreme Court showdown. The future of nominee Judge Brett Kavanaugh hanging in the balance after the woman accusing him of sexual misconduct revealed her identity to the Washington Post over the weekend. Lawmakers now scrambling for more information ahead of this week's committee vote. Senate Judiciary Committee member Jeff Flake telling a number of news outlets if they push forward without any attempt with hearing what she's had to say, I'm not comfortable voting yes. We need to hear from her, and I don't think I'm alone in this. He told Politico that, but he also spoke to the Wall Street Journal. Meantime, Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley issuing a statement saying he's working to set up follow-up calls with Judge Kavanaugh and his accuser ahead of Thursday's vote. And now we are learning that Kavanaugh's accuser is willing to testify publicly in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Her lawyer revealing the development in an interview on the Today Show. Here now, Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. Where do they go from here, Judge?
It looks as though there's going to be, regrettably, because this was such an awful experience and an awful time in our lives, another Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas type hearing where Dr. Ford will actually testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee in public and state her case and be examined by Republicans and Democrats. Republicans have an issue to be addressed in a minute. And then Judge Kavanaugh will be examined, and the Senate and the public will decide who is more credible, her allegations 35 years later or his denial. When Anita Hill testified, and this came out of the blue in the Clarence Thomas hearings, much as this has come out of the blue. When she testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee, the Republicans went for her jugular. The late Senator Arlen Specter, the former district attorney of the city of Philadelphia, engaged in one of the most, what we call destructive cross-examinations I've ever seen. I don't know that that can be done today in this Me Too era. The Republicans are going to have to be a little gentler. There's only 2 female members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Both are Democrats. Both are announced opponents to Judge Kavanaugh. So this is a virgin territory that Judge Kavanaugh and his supporters and the White House now confront.
But there is much to be explored in these accusations.
Yes.
I mean, just the timing of it, the fact that Senator Dianne Feinstein first learned about it in July, that it just was revealed last week. The FBI has put basically a letter in the letter in Brett Kavanaugh's file, but Brett Kavanaugh has been investigated over many times over the 25 years that he was in serving the government.
By the FBI to get his job in the Bush White House, to get various levels of clearance, security clearances in the Bush White House, to get his job, which he now has, United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, the second most important court in the land, and in preparation for the nomination to the Supreme Court. I myself have been the subject of these FBI investigations for nomination to positions. I know how thorough they can be. When I looked at that report, I couldn't believe some of the stuff they found out about me. Not a peep about this. Now, Dr. Ford says she suffered from repressed memory, and this did not come out until 2012 when she was
30 years after it allegedly happened.
Correct. She was in a counseling session with her husband. She revealed it to the counselor and to her husband at the same time. The counselor has notes. The notes are not precisely consistent with the letter, but they are generally consistent. How does law enforcement view a complaint made 35 years after the date? With grave and serious skepticism.
But, Judge, is it disqualifying? And again, you raise the issue of if the Senate Judiciary Committee interviews this woman, makes her testify publicly, you have to press her on any potential bias.
Yes, of course. So this gets
how she's conducted herself in recent years, what her political affiliation is, which is said to be a Democrat.
What contributions has she made? Who does she communicate with on social media? Now, where social media either has disappeared or is disappearing, she may very well say, I'm protecting the people I communicate with, but the Senate's going to have to get into this. I don't think there's going to be a vote on Thursday. I don't even know if they can hold a hearing that quickly. The woman and her lawyers are in California. Judge Kavanaugh is here. I don't know what kind of backroom negotiating is going on at this point. So is your question to me, even if what she says is true, is that disqualifying? I would think in this era it would be.
But it's still, we will never, this is my opinion, we will never really know the truth. You have the two men who she says were in the room or did this to her who deny it, both Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge repeatedly, and then her word. So it is her word against their word. So is that, if that's all we find out, is that disqualifying?
No, she has, and those who are promoting her have what lawyers call the burden of proof. She has to make her case. If this thing is a wash, if she expresses these complaints with the same degree of credibility if the Judge Kavanaugh denies them, then it's a wash. I would think this will go to the floor of the Senate, where I think he will pass. Now, about going to the floor of the Senate, the Senate Judiciary Committee operates differently. You do not need a majority vote on the Judiciary Committee to get to the floor of the Senate.
Right.
So even if Senators Graham and Flake say not enough time, the nomination can still be heard by the full Senate.
Do you want a quick question, really quick?
Well, what if, in fact, she is a Democrat? We know that's been circulated out there. What impact will that have on all of this?
I can't answer that until I actually hear her testify and hear her being cross-examined and decide how credible she is.
And if there's no police report, which there wasn't, sorry.
No, should we, but any chance that they pull the nomination?
I doubt it.
Okay.
I doubt it. I mean, this was a slam dunk 3 days ago, and a tremendous amount of work has gone in. And Judge Kavanaugh, aside from this, whether it's true or not, is profoundly qualified.
Joining us now from Louisiana, Senator John Kennedy, a Republican member of the Judiciary Committee. We should note we invited all 10 committee Democrats to join us today. None of them accepted. But we're happy to have you, Senator Kennedy. What do you make of this allegation against Kavanaugh back when he was a teenager? Do you think it'll do anything to derail his nomination, his confirmation?
I'm fairly confident that our founding fathers did not intend the process to work this way. So far, it's pretty much been an intergalactic freak show. Senator Grassley, our chairman, did the best he could at the hearing. Senators kept interrupting him. They ignored the rules. We had over 240 protesters who stood up screaming. The only thing missing, I think, was the genitalia-shaped headgear. There were wild accusations about Kavanaugh, that he's evil, he hates women, he hates children, he hates little warm puppies. And now we have this recent allegation by Senator Feinstein. I mean, here's what we know. She's produced a letter. It's a secret letter, and we're not entitled to see it or know who wrote it. It supposedly was put together with the help of Stanford Law School. The lady in the letter says that 35 years ago, when she was a teenager and Judge Kavanaugh was a teenager, he allegedly sexual advances against her at a party. Now, Kavanaugh denies it. The only other person in the room denies it. Senator Feinstein's had the letter since July for 3 months. She said nothing. Nothing. Zero. Nada. Zilch. She didn't say anything in the confirmation hearing. She didn't say anything in our confidential session with Judge Kavanaugh when the senators and the nominee met privately. And now, after it's all over, she produces the letter. I think, Chris, in my opinion, most Americans are looking at this, most mainstream Americans, and they're thinking that Congress has hit rock bottom and started to dig. And I have been embarrassed by the whole process. And frankly, I'm no disrespect to Senator Feinstein or to Stanford Law School, but I'm a little bit offended. I sit on Judiciary Committee. They've had this stuff for 3 months. If they were serious about it, they should have told us about it.
Okay, so that was a full answer. Do you think that your committee will approve the Kavanaugh nomination and send it to the floor on this week as scheduled?
Yes, I think the vote will be 11-10.
That's a straight party line vote.
Straight party line vote. I think the nomination will come to the floor. That'll be up to Senator McConnell. I think every Republican will vote for Judge Kavanaugh. I think at least 2 and probably more Democrats will. You may disagree with Judge Kavanaugh's political or judicial philosophy. I don't. Kavanaugh believes that the role of a judge is to interpret the law, not make the law, and I agree with that. No fair-minded American can believe that he's not qualified. He went to Yale Law School. He didn't get his law degree from Costco. He has a total command of Supreme Court precedent. I think he's a legal rock star. Now, this new allegation, I don't know what our Democratic friends expect us to do. What do they want us to do? We got a letter, but it's secret. We don't know who wrote it. All we know is that a female wrote it from California, and Stanford Law School helped to write it. And we can't see who are going to cross-examine? Senator Feinstein? I mean, give me a break.
At least 2 Republican lawmakers want to delay a Senate committee vote on Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh after a woman said he sexually assaulted her decades ago. The Washington Post published a report Sunday detailing Christine Blasey Ford's claims. She says Kavanaugh pinned her to a bed and tried to undress her while grinding his body against hers back in the early 1980s when the two were in high school. Ford sent a confidential letter detailing the incident to Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein in late July. Ford decided to go public with her allegation after the story leaked earlier this month. Kavanaugh denied the allegation last week. A White House official told the Post Sunday that the president won't withdraw Kavanaugh's nomination. The Senate Judiciary Committee is scheduled to vote to advance Kavanaugh's nomination Thursday, but Republican Senator Jeff Flake and a number of Democrats called for it to be postponed. Flake told Politico Sunday that he's not comfortable voting for Kavanaugh until lawmakers hear from Ford. GOP Senator Bob Corker also called for a delay Sunday, though he's not a member of the committee. A spokesman for Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley said he's trying to schedule phone interviews with both Ford and Kavanaugh ahead of Thursday's vote. When it comes to the full Senate, Kavanaugh needs only a simple majority to get confirmed. Due to the 51-49 split in the Senate, Republicans would need to be nearly unanimous or persuade a few Democrats over to their side.
For more about the impact of Florence in North Carolina, we turn to Republican Senator Thom Tillis. He's at the Red Cross shelter in Charlotte. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
Senator, how's your state holding up in the wake of this storm?
Well, we're doing as well as we can. This is a weather event that I believe will exceed the damage that Matthew did just 2 years ago. So while we were still recovering from that event, we've got the same areas engulfed and rivers that are going to overflow their banks over the next few days. And I think some of the worst part of the storm hasn't even occurred yet. It will as we see the rivers flow back to the coast.
When you say it hasn't occurred yet, what do you expect?
Well, with the rain levels and some of the cresting estimates for the Cape Fear River, a number of the other rivers and tributaries that head ultimately to our sounds or out to the ocean, we're talking about crest amounts that exceed what we saw with Hurricane Matthew. And I'm in Charlotte, we're just now beginning to see the rain bands more consistently dump water in this region. It's supposed to move up through the mountains. So the river basins are going to take a matter of days before we'll see the full effects of the storm. And we're already seeing a number of roads cut off, interstates likely to be closed over the next 24 to 48 hours. That creates a number of challenges for the local communities and for disaster relief.
Are you getting the federal help you need?
We are. I think that the FEMA assets were positioned as well as they could be before we knew where the storm was going to make landfall. The Red Cross is doing an extraordinary job. We have 4 evacuation centers here in the Charlotte area that have people from as far as Wilmington, Jacksonville, and Columbia, South Carolina here. It's at capacity. We have 3 others that continue to have capacity. We'd expect to see some of those fill up as the storm progresses through this part of the region.
During Hurricane Harvey, there were troubles with emergency services, people having difficulty getting through. Is that okay in this case?
At this point, in our section of the state, yes. There are certainly areas in the eastern part of the state where Florence made landfall, where flooding, down power lines, down trees are creating challenges. But the reports that we're getting is we're working through them. Duke Power's on the scene. They're trying to do everything they can to restore electricity to hundreds of thousands, and I don't believe we've seen the end of that. We've seen several thousand homes in my own county here in Mecklenburg County in Charlotte that are out of power. That's going to continue. It'll likely be weeks before it's all fully restored.
All right, Senator, when you get back to Washington, you got a vote on Tuesday in the Judiciary Committee, which you sit on. There's been some information about sexual misconduct allegations against Brett Kavanaugh, the president's nominee. Have you looked at the letter that is now a part of his file? Have you looked at that?
I haven't seen the letter. As a matter of fact, I believe that the member that first received the letter was as late as July. And quite honestly, I'm shocked that the matter didn't come up in the nearly 32 hours of testimony that Judge Kavanaugh was before us in the open session, or the nearly hour and a half session that we had in a closed session. That information never came up. So when we get back to Washington this week, we'll take a look at it. But it really raises a question in my mind about if this was material to the confirmation process, why on earth over the past 4 to 6 weeks hasn't it been discussed among the committee members?
That's right. And we should make quite clear, this is something he's denied categorically. This is something that allegedly happened much more than 30 years ago. But now that it is in the mix, is your feeling that this is a ploy of some kind, or that this is, while it is so long ago, sufficiently important to look seriously and put into your calculation and others as they make their vote?
Well, I've spent most of my time focused on Hurricane Florence, but the questions that we will ask and seek answers to next week are, why sit on it for weeks? We understand that the person who wrote the letter is not willing to come forward. So we have a confidential witness not willing to sit down, at least in a closed setting. That's problematic to me. And as you said, Judge Kavanaugh has categorically denied the allegations, and I put some weight on that.
Very quickly, Senator, you think he'll be confirmed by the Senate?
Oh, I do. I think that we'll move forward to report them out of committee and confirm them before October.
Senator Tillis, thanks so much for being with us.
The Senate Judiciary Committee had planned to vote on Thursday to advance Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court nomination, but that timing is now in question. On Sunday afternoon, a woman named Christine Blasey Ford went public, alleging that Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her while both were high school students. Judge Kavanaugh has denied these allegations. So joining us now is Deborah Katz. She is the lawyer representing Christine Blasey Ford. Ms. Katz, thank you very much for being here. Let's get to a question that is at the top of everyone's mind, which is, will your client, Christine Ford, be willing to testify in public to the Judiciary Committee?
The answer is yes.
She is willing to do it. Has she been asked by any of the lawmakers to do that?
That's interesting. The answer is no.
She's not been asked, but she is now willing to do so. Is she in conversations with people? Have the lawmakers reached out and tried to talk to her via phone?
We've heard from no one. We've seen various statements made on television, but and statements that are being bandied about for political reason, but no one's asked her. No.
How did she come around to being willing to testify publicly? Because as we know the story, she really did not want to come forward. She wrote a confidential letter. So tell me the trajectory of her willingness now to go to such a public forum.
Well, you're right. There was a great deal of ambivalence and about whether she wanted to be publicly associated with these allegations. And essentially, that choice was made by her to remain confidential. She asked Senator Feinstein to keep her letter and her allegations confidential, and Feinstein agreed to do that. And that decision was essentially taken away from her as those allegations were leaked, and it resulted in a great deal of pressure from members of the media who knew who she was, who then started really invading her privacy, showing up at Stanford where she teaches and leaving her notes and emailing her and calling her. And she knew that she was going to be, her allegations were going to be outed. And that, in fact, is what occurred. And as a result, she decided to take control of this and tell this in her own voice.
So while we have you, perhaps you can help us fill in the blanks on some of her story. She says that she was at a party in probably 1982 in Montgomery County, Maryland. She says that there were 4 guys there. These are high school students, as was she. There were 4 guys there. Were there any girls there that day?
Yes, there was another girl at this party, yes.
And has your client spoken to any of those other guys or that girl who could help corroborate her story?
She has not.
And why not? Is it time to do that?
That's not her job to do that. If this is going to be investigated, it should be done by investigators.
So she also says that this happened. Well, let me just read to you what she says happened, because I want to be able to say it in her own words. She says, Kavanaugh was on top of me while laughing with, and there was a redacted name, who we now know was Mark Judge, his friend, who periodically jumped on Kavanaugh. They both laughed as Kavanaugh tried to disrobe me in their highly inebriated state. With Kavanaugh's hand over my mouth, I feared he may inadvertently kill me. It took her a while to use the term attempted rape. It took her years to use that. But she stands by this account that I've just read?
She does. And just to be clear, the reason she felt that he might inadvertently kill her is he had his hand over her mouth, and she was having a difficult time breathing. And he is larger, and he was pressing his weight against her. And so inebriated, he was ignoring the fact that she was attempting to scream and having a difficult time breathing. And she believes that but for his inebriation and his inability to take her clothes off, he would have raped her.
Here's what Brett Kavanaugh says. He's released a statement. I categorically and unequivocally deny this allegation. I did not do this back in high school or at any time. So where does that leave your client?
That leaves her knowing that she's told the truth. She's done it at great personal risk. She's now going to have to live with the tremendous efforts by people to annihilate her and to try to discredit her. She's telling the truth. She took a polygraph. She mentioned this to her in her therapy sessions in 2012. She came forward before this nominee was nominated. This is someone who has told the truth at great personal cost, and we all know what she's going to have to withstand as a result of having come forward.
Let's talk about that polygraph. As we understand it, she did it at your behest. You suggested that she do it, knowing that her veracity would be challenged. Would you be willing to release the results of that polygraph?
I will, to the appropriate authorities who wish to see it, yes.
And who would those appropriate authorities be?
Well, at this point, it's the Senate Judiciary Committee that has a constitutional obligation to vet this nominee.
I think that Senator Feinstein was saying something to the effect of the FBI should be looking into that. Is that happening?
I don't know what's happening at this point. That will be discussions that I'm sure we'll be having later today.
Once your client saw Brett Kavanaugh be nominated, when she saw him up there with his beautiful family and people recommending him and the glossy PR campaigns for him and what a stellar record he has and all of these other women who have known him for years who have come forward to recommend his character, did that give her pause? Did that change her calculation?
She's somebody who's a very thoughtful person, and she, throughout this process, was really weighing her civic duty, which is really something that she takes quite seriously, versus the personal cost that she would certainly have to incur if she came forward. And she really struggled with that, and I think as anyone would. And as the hearings got closer, she continued to weigh that and saw that essentially this nominee was being rushed through, documents were being withheld, and she really made the calculation that no one would really listen to her. The Republican Party was determined to get this nominee through, and at that point she just felt that coming forward would be hopeless and she would put her family and herself at great personal risk, and chose not to. Unfortunately, that decision was taken from her.
So when this letter, this confidential letter, went public, and you say that then reporters were on the scent of it, did your client, Christine Ford, ever have a conversation with Senator Feinstein?
We were in touch with her office throughout this period, yes. Meaning
that there was a direct conversation between your client and the senator?
She spoke to the senator very soon after the letter was sent, which was July 30th. At that point, Dr. Blasey retained counsel, and then communications went between staff and Dr. Blasey's counsel.
Because the question is, why did Senator Feinstein sit on the letter? Or is that your impression? Well, I guess my question is, what was the point? What was Senator Feinstein supposed to do with this letter?
Okay, I just want to be clear. I think that's an unfair characterization. In this moment, victims need to be able to control when and whether their stories become public. She went to her senator because she had information that she thought was very important that had bearing on the fitness and character of this nominee. And throughout that period of time, Senator Feinstein's office was eager for her to come forward. If she felt comfortable coming forward, there was no effort to dissuade her from coming forward. This was entirely this woman's decision. And I think that was appropriate. I think that's how victims of trauma and sexual violence must be treated.
And so was that letter shared with the committee?
Apparently at a later point it was.
At a later point, meaning, but before the hearing? I'm just trying to get the timeline. Before the hearing?
No.
No.
It was not shared. And honestly, we made the request. My client made the request that Senator Feinstein treat her allegations confidentially, and Senator Feinstein agreed to do so. I will say that the door was always open, and the staff made it clear that if she changed her mind, she could come forward. As Dr. Blasey saw these hearings unfold, her choice became more clear in her mind that she did not want to come forward. She saw this as a very highly politicized and very brutal process, and she was not wanting to inject herself in this, because who would want to incur this kind of really highly politicized attack game that she now finds herself in? So she was fine with that decision, but that decision was taken away from her after the hearings when her allegations were essentially leaked.
Understood. So what does Dr. Blasey want now? Does Dr. Blasey want Brett Kavanaugh to sit on the Supreme Court, or for his approval, his confirmation, to be blocked?
That's not what she wants one way or another. She wants the Senate to do what it is constitutionally obligated to do. She's taken this great risk of coming forward. She's a credible person. These are very serious allegations, and they should be treated seriously, and she should be treated respectfully during this process. And unfortunately, at this point, she's already getting a lot of hostile threats and recrimination, and that is, of course, quite disturbing and unfortunate.
Indeed. Deborah Katz, thank you very much for all the information. Please keep us posted as to
will
when
do.
lawmakers do reach out and if she's going to testify publicly. Thank you very much.
Will do. Thank you.